Good morning, brothers and sisters. My name is Gabriel Praw, past president of ILW Local 52. I'm president of the Seattle chapter of the A. Philip Randolph Institute. Today, we are standing united together to share some of the history of the ILW. We are talking about the birth of the ILW, 1934, where striking maritime workers were murdered by law enforcement, the cops. No one was ever convicted for those crimes, but it's important for us to share some of the history of the ILW and why the action in Juneteenth happened on June 19, 2020 in Seattle and the Bay Area. So to give a brief history of what the 1934 struggle was, I have my brother on the left, Brother Lee Carr, is going to start this conversation. Brother Lee.
Thank you, Brother Gabe. My name is Leith. I'm a longshoreman, and we're here at a very important historic part of the Seattle waterfront called Smith Cove, where a great battle was fought on July 18th and 19th, 1934, on the railroad tracks right behind me. This was fought on July 18th and 19th, just 2 weeks after an incident in San Francisco that we commemorate today as Bloody Thursday, the 5th of July, where two strikers, Howard Sperry and Nick Berdoise, were shot dead by the cops. The reason they were shot dead by the cops the day after the 4th of July is that on the 4th of July that year, the mayor of San Francisco, Mayor Rossi, had given a great big speech in Civic Auditorium where he had riled up the cops and the deputies and the company goons and the National Guard that he called into the city on Bloody Thursday, July 5th. He riled them up to attack the strikers the next day, telling the audience that the strikers were a threat to America and that the cops and deputies and guardsmen had to defend America against them. The first blood in the strike had been spilled on May 15th in San Pedro, where cops and special deputies and goons had shot down two strikers in the streets of San Pedro in cold blood. John Knutson and Dickie Parker. Dickie Parker died that same day. John Knutson died several weeks later. They're commemorated on May 15th as the first blood of the strike. There was also another brother who was assassinated by company goons sometime after the strike ended on the docks of Hong Kong. He was a sailor who had been part of the strike. But there was also an ambush against one of the leaders of the strike committee in Seattle, a longshoreman named Shelby Daffron. He was ambushed by goons and deputies on June 30th, 1934, and shot in the back. That was just about a week before Bloody Thursday. Bloody Thursday is celebrated as the day for all six of these martyrs, all seven of these martyrs, because it's the day when two strikers were killed on the same day, and it was also followed by a citywide general strike in San Francisco, where the city shut down in support of us. But the final martyr to die during the duration of the strike itself was named Olaf Helland, and he died right here on these railroad tracks called Smith Cove. Smith Cove was an important pier on the Seattle waterfront at the time, and the employers had brought in their cops, their special deputies, and their company goons to militarize it. They had a whole barracks set up at Smith Cove where they were trying to move cargo with company goons and move it across the picket line. The picket line was occupying the entrance to the port and the railroad tracks. On July 18th, longshoremen and sailors from all over the Puget Sound came to Seattle, to Smith Cove, to reinforce that picket line. And we occupied the train tracks. We stopped the train from moving with the scab cargo. We held the train tracks all night. And the next morning, the cops attacked in full force with a whole line of horseback cavalry. And they set up machine gun nests on the Garfield Bridge. That structure you see there is the Garfield Bridge. It's still standing today. The machine gun nests were on there. There's a number of photos that were taken by Seattle Times reporters of the battle. You can find them in this book, A History of Seattle Waterfront Workers by Ron Magden. It's important to understand the longshoremen at the time were called wharf rats. They were looked down upon by the so-called middle class of the period. Their lives didn't matter. Their lives didn't matter to the employers. Their lives didn't matter to the police. Only once they gained the economic power to demonstrate that their lives could cost money did their lives start to matter to the employers' policy books a little bit. There was a slur, wharf rats, that was used against the longshoremen, and wharf rats at the time were often considered to be non-white, even if they were of European descent. Sometimes they spoke English as a second language with an accent. The people up in Crown Heights, the people up on Queen Anne Hill, the people up in the people at the top of the hill who learn to smile as they kill, didn't consider them white or part of their middle class. And this fed into the background of why they were killed by the cops during the strike. I also hope you will read another book called The Big Strike by Mike Quinn. It tells the overall history of the coastwide maritime strike of 1934. And in both these books, you will find that there had been a previous attempt in 1916 at a coastwide strike. Other strikers were killed by the cops in that. Those strikers were also murdered by the cops without any investigation or charges that were brought against the cops, but they died in vain because that strike failed. It failed because there was no interracial solidarity in 1916. The union failed to include the non-European workers in its ranks, failed to include the black workers in its ranks, and that's why the employers were able to crush the 1916 strike. Fortunately, lessons were learned from that defeat, lessons that would enable the working class to pull off a successful strike in 1934. Back to you, Gabe.
Thank you, Brother Lee. I would like to get my sister over here to give us some information. And you want to introduce yourself to the people?
Yes, my name's Aaliyah Leiter. My first shift on the waterfront was April 2018, so I'm very new to the industry, and I'm here humbly with my brothers who have been doing this a lot longer than I have. And I feel responsible as a new worker and a young worker to continue this work. And today is Bloody Thursday. We mourn our dead today, and it's a day of reverence and respect for us. And the 2 men that were shot in the back, and the 7 men actually, their deaths were not in vain because it sparked the birth of the ILWU. So we see that same police terror today in 2020 as we did in 1934. And I wish to personally be in solidarity with the movement we see today and say to protesters today to be vigilant, hold your line, and be firm on your demands and keep fighting and be safe. Also, keep an eye out for each other, and we have to come together on this, all of us. So, thank you. Okay.
Thank you, my sister. It's important for me to go back to 1934 because people need to understand what the strike of 1934 was all about. It was about the 6-hour day. Workers back then was working 20-something hours a day and even work for days before they get a break. Systemic racism. The bosses, they was pick and choosing who they wanted to work. They was discriminating on other workers. And black workers were not allowed to work back then in that area. The fact remains is we see the same thing today. Not only that, workers got together and decided we're going to control all this system of working class people gets to get on the job. So they decided to fight for a union hall, which would give them the ability to control and make it equal for our workers to be able to work. But on top of it, let's not forget the 1934 was not only in San Francisco, but it also was in Minneapolis. Minneapolis, there was 2 Teamsters workers that was shot and killed by cops as well. And let's fast forward to 2020, George Floyd, who was also killed by cops in Minneapolis. So there's some history about the police and working class people. Let's make this clear. Bloody Thursday was part of vigilantes and then police attacking working class people. African Americans are the most exploited and the most oppressed longer than the immigrants. It's been over 400 years. When the rich want to oppress the workers, they call the police to kill the people. Remember the A market struggle. there's a lot of struggle that working class people have been through racism and police brutality. Racism is a social contract. It's about power. So let's keep that in mind. And we reaching out to all our brothers and sisters because we want you to understand the history of the ILWU and the position that labor plays when it comes to taking action in the point of production. This is the only way that we can make a change. You know, we admire our young people out there protesting and organizing to make a change. But without the help of labor, that change is seen far away. So labor needs to step up and be part of this change. And we ask that our brothers and sisters engage more in the history and the tradition of what the labor movement is all about. And we thank you for listening to us, and we look forward and sharing more history in the future about labor and the change to make this world a better place to live. And my sister got one more thing to say to you, because we want you to be able to connect with us on every social media that possible that you can connect with us. So sister?
Our Instagram is at Stop Police Terror Seattle, no underscores or anything, just at Stop Police Terror Seattle. Please add us on there so we can have our allies and work together.
Stop Police Terror Seattle.
And so you know, we are part of the movement of to stop systemic racism and stop police terror. Thank you very much, and join us and be with us to make the change.